With business class on British Airways, I think that you get what you pay for, and that can be taken either way, but it obviously starts with the price. And the first thing to note about buying tickets to Tokyo is that there are only 3 airlines that offer direct flights to Tokyo from London. And those 3 airlines are ANA, JAL, and of course, British Airways. So I've just done a quick search here, and it's September right now, and I'm looking at November flights from Friday to Friday. And the British Airways business class round trip is less than half the price of an ANA flight of the same nature. So obviously this is going to change depending on when you're flying to Tokyo. Obviously if you come in cherry blossom season, then they're probably all going to be quite expensive. And we're looking at just a random time in November, which is not peak season at all. Now, if I change it to a different date, let's just do sort of, I don't know, Wednesday to Friday here. Then now the prices are much more comparable. So we can actually see that British Airways is the second in the list and is actually slightly more expensive than ANA. So obviously the prices are going to change depending on when you come to Japan. But what I have noticed is that BA does seem to be cheaper when you do a full week. So for example, Friday to Friday. And that was the case for me. So that's why I chose British Airways this time. I live in Japan and I go back to the UK around once a year, but this flight in particular did kind of remind me that British Airways feels like it needs a few updates here and there. So I would give my overall experience a 6 out of 10, but because it was so much cheaper than the others, I am bumping it up to a 7, just because that price point really does make a difference. So there are a few kind of noteworthy things that happened to me on this flight, and it started with me getting to the airport really early. So early that they thought that I was supposed to be on the flight one before mine and tried to check me in for it. We had a discussion and I told them that's not what I was supposed to be doing, and they went and talked to someone and they said, oh, we can put you on this flight anyway. And I said, well, why not? It's better than just waiting around at the airport for hours on end. So they put me on the earlier flight, which meant I had to sprint through the airport to catch this flight, which also means I didn't get any lounge footage for you guys, sorry. But I am very grateful that the staff even considered doing that for me, because I know that a lot of airline staff, a lot of staff in general, wouldn't have even thought of that option. So it is nice to have been able to get to the UK a bit earlier than intended. So I rushed onto my flight and got there out of breath, which I actually didn't need to be because I was just well on time, but I was in that stress mode, you know? So I was very grateful when I got the choice of orange juice or champagne, and of course I took the champagne. Hey, who's taking a sip? Oh yeah, that was me. Then they took my order for what drink I wanted post takeoff. Then something that was very new to me was that the entire safety briefing was on screen. The only thing that the staff did was point out the exits. And it was kind of that thing where they have a bunch of B-list celebrities in the safety video, most of which only British people are really going to recognize. Then the next notable thing that was not so good was that we left an hour after schedule. Obviously it was nice that I was put on the earlier flight, but it's still nice when the flight goes on time instead of just sitting in the runway. Then I got my tea, which I had pre-ordered, and it came with some little shortbread biscuits, which made me happy. I saw that the people who ordered alcoholic drinks got a sort of savory snack, but I felt special with my shortbread biscuits. So then it was time for me to choose my first meal. I do quite like the British Airways business class menu. There's generally 3 options per meal, and for this flight there were 2 meals. There's also quite a nice selection of drinks. There's quite a few wines, but there's also quite a lot of cocktails and beer as well. I wanted to choose the beef, but somehow they had already run out when they got to me, so the staff member sold me on the fish dish, even though I wouldn't usually get fish on a plane. And I think that was a mistake because it was kind of soft and it was okay, but I probably should have gone for the vegetarian option instead. That being said, the feta starter was actually quite nice, and so was the dessert. Even though it doesn't look like much, it was quite a nice like sesame pudding. And I do quite like the setup of the meals. You get like proper cutlery and plates and glasses. And one touch that I'm pretty sure is going to be unique to the Japan flights is that they have these glasses for the water, which look like Edo Kiriko, which is a type of traditional glassware in Japan, and I really like that touch. I tried some of their wine, and then I got a sparkling rosé at the end to round it off, and it bubbled so much. The bubbles were going so fast. I think that must be something to do with the altitude, but I was just mesmerized by the pace of these bubbles. So after the meal, the air conditioning was already starting to take a little bit of a toll on my skin because I was feeling a bit chilly, but also my skin was quite dry. So it was a good time to take a look at the little amenity bag that you get. It's kind of a standard business class wash bag. There's nothing too surprising in there. A toothbrush, a sleeping mask, that kind of thing. But they do have this little set from the White Company, which I think smells quite nice. And also a little tip for anyone who cares about their nails. I used the lip balm on my nails and I just reapplied it every now and then throughout the flight, and my nails were fine at the end, because usually when I go on a long flight like that, then my nails start to chip and it's not very nice. In the bathroom, they have the White Company items. They have a moisturizer in there, and the bathroom is quite small, but it is bigger than the economy class bathrooms. By then, I was feeling a little tipsy from the wines that I had with the meal, so I thought I'd settle down to have a look at the entertainment and perhaps fall into a wine-induced sleep. I did notice that quite a few people had difficulty opening the screen because the buttons for both the tray table and the screen to come out were quite stiff. And also, unfortunately, my touchscreen didn't work, so I had to use the little remote that's on the side. And so this is what I mean by it needs a little bit of updating. But thankfully, the movie library was very well updated because there's a lot of new movies on there, but they also had a great selection of sort of British classics and comfort viewing movies. So there was like the whole series of Harry Potter on there, which is great for when you just want something familiar. Thankfully, the rest of the buttons worked fine. I actually quite like them. It's very easy to adjust your seat and make it into a bed. I actually quite like the layout as a whole, because even though I was quite exposed in that aisle seat because I couldn't actually choose my seat, I would normally go for a window seat for more privacy, then it was still quite spacious, and I quite like that the little footrest is actually separate from the seat or the bed, because then it means that you can recline but you can still easily access the plugs and the little drawer where you can keep your stuff. The bed itself is reasonably comfortable. It is a little bit on the hard side and it is a little bit narrow, but I would say it's fairly spacious for being on a flight. I sleep on my side and there was enough room to kind of shimmy from side to side, and you can just about sleep like this, but there's not a ton of room for your arms or a ton of room for kind of weird sleeping positions. And the pillow was pretty nice, and the blanket was just enough warmth for me in a t-shirt. If I had been in anything longer, then I think it would have been a little bit hot. If you can't sleep or you get a bit peckish, then there is a bar area which has a bunch of snacks and water, and there's even a little fridge which on my flight had Japanese snacks and some sandwiches in there as well. Or you can ask the staff for extra drinks as well. The staff on the flight were pretty nice, but they were also pretty casual, which I think is fairly normal for British Airways. I think it's not for everyone, but it does make them a bit more approachable, I would say, and also they're not too overbearing and constantly asking you questions. So then, I don't know how many hours later, but it was time for the second meal, which was a little lighter than the other meal. But once again, the one that I wanted was already sold out. I don't know why they couldn't have gone round anti-clockwise or something this time. Never mind, I ended up having to get the seafood udon. And I don't like being hyperbolic about food, and I know that someone spent time making that, but I think that was actually the worst udon I've ever eaten. It was really, really soft and it just tasted of soy sauce and fish. Don't get the udon on British Airways. That's all I can say. Otherwise, the starter again was pretty good. It was smoked salmon, and the dessert was surprisingly light and pretty tasty. Then we landed about an hour and a half late, I think, which makes sense given that we took off about an hour late, but we were able to get off fairly smoothly without having to wait too long on the ground. Overall, I left feeling relatively rested and actually quite positive about the experience despite some of the shortcomings. Mostly it's just things that I think need a little bit of updating and a little bit of extra preparation maybe. So I do think that if it's in your budget for this long flight from London to Tokyo, it is worth getting business class on BA, just because it has that lower price point and you're going to just feel more rested from having a little bit of personal space and the ability to lie flat. But if you think that it would be stretching your budget to get business class, then I'm not sure it is worth it, because you may as well spend that extra money on some things in Tokyo or in Japan. You could even spend it on a bit of travel to somewhere else in Japan and just dedicate the first day that you're in Japan to doing something very low-key or getting a bit of rest so that you have more energy for the rest of your trip. But if you are on more of a budget, but you do want that extra comfort, then I would really recommend premium economy because it really is a step up from economy. I hope that helps you at least a little bit with your decision on how to get to Japan, but let me know which one you end up doing. Safe flight and see you soon!